Doctor Who. Now, Whovians have been quite fortunate, as every single Doctor Who episode, or at least those that still currently exist within the BBC archive, have been made readily available for anybody to purchase, including the one that, well, was never finished. But there's still quite a substantial amount of missing Doctor Who material out there, where for one reason or another, it was cancelled, it got made, but it's currently stuck in some kind of loophole, or it was made, but it's too obscure for anybody to notice. So, in this video, we're going to adopt the Iceberg format, where we're going to talk about Doctor Who media, lost media more precisely, from that perhaps the general public will know about, all the way down to even the most geekiest Doctor Who nerds might go, that existed? So, without any further ado, let's explore the 10 levels of the Doctor Who lost media iceberg. Perhaps the most famous case of missing media are that of the missing episodes of Doctor Who, from Hartnell to Troughton, through season 1 to 6. Each series has at least a minimal amount of 10 to plus parts that are missing. The question as to why was simply it just wasn't cost effective for the BBC to store and archive programmes, as the concepts towards reruns and home media was still several years away, so added amount of copies were junked and the master tapes were taped over. But hey, there's still hope out there. Occasionally, a print will turn up in a foreign broadcast company. Not often, but it does happen. And there are some currently missing Doctor Who episodes that are in the hands of private collectors. As a fan, it's gratifying to know that they're still out there safely. But then at the same time, it's heartbreaking to know that they're inaccessible.
And the best thing to do, not create a fuss around that. Let it work its way out. Is my best advice. If anything comes to light, I think, everyone else will get to see it. It's as simple as that. I'm certainly not done on the Doctor Who front yet.
Out of 97 currently missing episodes, will they all return back? Well, as every year goes by, that seems less and less likely. But hopefully in our lifetime, that number will decrease. Moving onwards, from the oldest to the most recent of missing Doctor Who content, being the remove sequence of the Doctor Who Experience Time Fractured, a live walkthrough event where there's some specially made pre-roll videos, provided by David Bradley and John Barrowman, reprising their respected roles. Although only a matter of weeks after this casting announcement, it's been revealed that John Barrowman, who had already recorded some segments of the show, will no longer be featured, down to the rising controversy that while filming on the set of Doctor Who, he would have a tendency for popping out his wedding vegetable. His other reprisals as Captain Jack, in what was meant to be the next big Finnish audio play of Torchwood, co-starring David Tennant as the Doctor, has now been removed for a release. If there's any optimism that we will ever see any of these projects, it likely won't be anytime soon. Now going back 36 years earlier in 1985, newly appointed BBC head of the company, Michael Grade, who wasn't very fond of sci-fi, felt that the BBC's minuscule budget just couldn't compete with the likes of Star Wars. So only halfway through the 22nd series of Doctor Who, he made the dubious choice to cancel the show, which accumulated into a nation backlash. Grade retracted the cancellation, but placed Doctor Who on an 18-month hiatus. This essentially dissolved the plans for season 26, which would have featured returned villains, such as Syl teaming up with the Ice Warriors, as well as another team-up between the Autons, the Master, or maybe the Rani, and unique new foes for the Doctor to face, such as the Children of January, which were meant to be outcast renegades from a parallel world. Another reprising villain was the Celestial Toymaker, taking utilisation of the most trendiest toy at the time, video games, as the Doctor would play one as it would decide the fate on the planet. The story would have been filmed and set at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, with the final line of season 22 was meant to allude to this, but with the uncertainty of Doctor Who's future, a slight edit was made before broadcast. When Doctor Who finally came back, the production team decided to take some poetic license. and structured the season as the Doctor would be on trial, a vibe they were getting from the higher-ups. Looking back in hindsight, this was pretty much the beginning of the end for the original run of Doctor Who. During the peak of Dalek mania, from 65 to 66, there were 2 Dalek movies, each respectively based upon the first and second Dalek story of the TV show. Even though the initial plan was to make 1 Dalek film a year, the second movie wasn't a tremendous success, so the third movie went unproduced. While there was never any pre-production or a script made, but fans have romanticised that the third film would have been based upon the third Dalek serial, The Chase, where the Daleks build their own TARDIS-like time machine chasing the TARDIS across time and space, ending with the Daleks fighting against a legless machine called the Mechanoids. Given the time frame that the movie would have been made in 67, I've always wondered if it would have been either the Mechanoids that the Daleks would have fight, or maybe the Cybermen, since they would have been well established in the show by this point. Or maybe, as a way to keep costs down, could it perhaps been another race or a similar looking robot to the Daleks? Okay, I'm just rambling at this point, so let's move on. The Daleks left Doctor Who for a period of 5 years. This was because their story creator, Terry Nation, was trying to launch a Dalek spin-off called The Destroyers. The script was made, but was unsuccessful into finding backing for the project, nor a TV station that wanted to take it under its wing, which at the time in the UK there were only 3, although decades later it finally materialised as an audio story by Big Finish. Terror of the Zygons had a small sequence at the beginning of the story where both Harry, Sarah and the Doctor first land in Scotland. It was cut out before broadcast because it had huge graining issues, something they were unable to fix at the time. When it was incorporated back into the DVD release years later, the picture only survived in black and white, so it had to be digitally colorized. In the Series 8 modern episode, Robots of Sherwood, there was a deleted portion where the Sheriff of Nottingham gets his head chopped off by Robin Hood, only to reveal that he's actually a cyborg. The main reason why it was removed out, because sadly at the same time there was a news reporter who was rather grisly beheaded. This sequence has still not been officially released by the BBC. After the new series episode Journey's End, the following story was The Next Doctor, a Cyberman Christmas episode. The original cliffhanger to Journey's End was the Doctor noting something odd on his computer screen, and boo! 2 Cybermen show up behind him. It's not really known on how it would have really followed into the next story. It likely would have been a completely different story entirely, but I'm kinda glad that they cut it. I think it would have spoiled and lessened the impact for the vibe that they were going for at the end. From 1963 to 1989, Doctor Who was cancelled in its 26th season. There were already scripts and plans for season 27, such as an alien race that would harm anybody if they had any weapons on them. A Civil War Ice Warrior episode that would have been the departure for Ace as she would have attended the Gallifrey Academy. A World War II storyline featuring the Cybermen, and a comedic idea as to how to introduce the new companion. All of these concepts and stories finally saw light, either adapted for a novelisation or an audio play. Doctor Who Confidential was a spin-off show covering the making of each individual modern episode, broadcast shortly after its respected twin episode, covering season 1 to 6. While cut-down portions have been made available on home media, the BBC have yet to release the whole Doctor Who Confidential in full, as well as its junior version, Totally Doctor Who. Between 1990 and 2004, there was no new series of Doctor Who, but there were certainly attempts to get it back off the ground, with outside sources interested to revitalise the show. With the biggest VIP interested to take on the franchise was Spielberg. His company Amblin were going to finance and lay down the foundation for a new series, although their plans involved of rebooting the franchise, introducing Doctor Who to an American audience. The story would have featured Gallifrey politically going downwards. Disbanding the planet, the Doctor steals a TARDIS in search for his long-lost father, finding out that his mum came from Earth. Monsters and villains he would have encountered were the Daleks, Cybermen and the Yeti, although they were very loosely inspired from their UK counterpart. In the end, the rights went to Fox and they made a TV movie as a test pilot, keeping within loose continuity of the show. Needless to say, even though the pilot wasn't well received by fans, knowing on how drastically different the last story was, this was the lesser evil one out of the two. Going back a few years earlier, for the 30th anniversary of Doctor Who, there were plans to make a one-off direct-to-video feature, a multi-Doctor story titled Into the Dark Dimension, where Tom Baker's Doctor, regeneration doesn't quite go according to plan, resulting into an alternate timeline, featuring small cameos from other surviving Doctors, which the respected actors didn't approve upon the script. The estimated budget and cost for the special wouldn't have been enough to fully execute the vision, so it was subsequently cancelled, and in its place we got a loosely inspired Children in Need special, crossing over with EastEnders with a 3D gimmick. While well intended and raising money for charity, I think we can all agree that its story isn't the most flawless. During the classic era of Doctor Who, it accumulated 3 theatre shows, the first of which was 1965's Curse of the Daleks, where an Earth spaceship crash lands on Skaro, where one of the astronauts has a cunning plan to make the Daleks fall and bow down to them, while the Daleks have a scheme of their own. The second one was 1974 Doctor Who and the Daleks, in the 7 Keys of Doomsday, playing for 4 weeks at the Adelphi Theatre in London. The play started with the regeneration of the third Doctor, achieved by projecting a picture of Jon Pertwee, flashing into Michael Sager, the actor who played the Doctor for the play. The play premiered just 2 days after the fourth Doctor's first episode. And finally, Doctor Who The Ultimate Adventure, featuring Jon Pertwee and Colin Baker playing the Doctor on separate nights, where the theatre show would mark the first time that both the Daleks and Cybermen would team up together. Unlike the last 2 theatre shows, thanks to some cunning Doctor Who fans who snuck a camera into the auditorium, we've actually got a video record of the show. And Big Finish did an audio adaptation with Colin Baker in 2008. Really, this could be its own subgenre in lost media. The sad thing about pantos and theatre shows is that a lot of the time they're not video or documented, so unless if there's a bootleg camera or the script gets leaked out there, there's truly no way to relive that theatre show. In the early 90s, animation company Nelvana approached the BBC to acquire a license to make a Doctor Who animated show. But, as ever the nature for the Doctor Who franchise in the 90s, this project never came to fruition. While concept art has emerged over the years, there's very little information about this version of the show. This wasn't the first attempt to bring Doctor Who into the animated world. About a decade earlier, famous TV company Hanna-Barbera tried but were unsuccessful acquiring the rights for Doctor Who, so in its place they made Fonz and the Happy Days Gang. While I can't say much for the Nelvana idea, looking at the quality of the Hanna-Barbera show, I don't think we were missing out that much. BBV and Real-Time Productions created a number of Doctor Who movie spin-offs, completely independent and without permission from the BBC. They were able to skirt around this, as from the 60s all the way up to the early 80s, any of the writers for the show were under a contract where they could retain the rights to their original characters, so BBV and Real-Time could directly ask the original screenwriters. Although in the actual spin-off material, they were unable to make any direct references to the Doctor or the TARDIS. Although come the new series, this loophole has now been closed, as now the BBC retains any of the rights for any of the new created characters or monsters, meaning that we'll probably never see Stephen Moffat go off and make an independent movie starring the Weeping Angels. The biggest direct-to-video project out of all of them was 1995's Downtime, starring the likes of the Brigadier, Sarah Jane, and Victoria, featuring the return of Professor Travis and the Yeti. Producer of the project, Ian Levine, began plans to release it on DVD as early as 2010 by filming a new version starring Sylvester McCoy, playing as his incarnation of the Doctor, finding himself trapped by the Great Intelligence, and is forced to watch helplessly with the event of Downtime playing out. Supposedly, the story has it that Ian Levine invited Sylvester to come over to his house. To be surprised to find a costume waiting for him, Sylvester may have filmed a few more pet projects for Levine. Of course, since this version directly references the Doctor, Ian Levine would need a blessing from the BBC to release it on DVD. But by 2015, when the film finally materialised on the format, it was just the original version. Ian Levine has released 2 sequences from his collaboration with Sylvester McCoy, but the actual projects have yet to emerge in full. For a number of years now, K9 creator Bob Baker has been trying to create a K9 movie titled K9 Timequake, where it will have K9 going up against Omega. Now, for those of you that are not quite as nerdy about Doctor Who, the concept is pretty much like if they made a Star Wars movie where R2-D2 was going to fight against the Emperor. It was going to be released in cinemas in 2017, but now the project's being reformatted as an audio production, with Brian Blessed cast as Omega nonetheless.
Gary Morgan, he wants to know, is there ever any chance of K9 Mark 1 joining forces with K9 Mark 3 in the upcoming film? Watch this space.
Hey, if you've enjoyed the video so far and would love to see more like it, then please consider to like and subscribe, as that would be very much appreciated. Anyway, on with the video.
During the time when Torchwood and Sarah Jane Adventures were in the midst of being planned out, there were many other ideas for spin-off shows, such as Rose Tyler, Earth Defense, set in the parallel world, but an idea that didn't get very far was a prequel show which would have starred the young version of William Hartnell's Doctor during his time at the Academy on Gallifrey, where we would have seen him build his very first sonic screwdriver. Starting production in 1989 was the most ambitious Doctor Who fan project as of yet, Devious. Set between the events of War Games starring Patrick Troughton and Spearhead from Space starring Jon Pertwee, where the regeneration accumulates an incarnation between both versions. It's a little bit of a convoluted plot, but a notable project, as they were able to get Jon Pertwee to make a small cameo by the end of the film. This marks the final time Jon Pertwee appeared as the Doctor, just about a year before his passing. The completed regeneration scene has been made available as a bonus feature on the War Games DVD. Since the film was made within the spare time of the filmmakers, it took a little over 20 years to get everything in the can, and to this day they're still ongoing doing the edits. At the time of recording, they've currently got episode 2 out, but there may be as many parts as 5 or 6, so we still got a little way to go. The Trial of Davros was a stage show performed in 1993 and re-performed in 2005 under the consentence of the BBC and the Terry Nation estate. The box office funds for both occasions went to various charities. The plot was set right after Genesis of the Daleks, where Davros was materialised away to stand trial against the Time Lords. The 2005 incarnation had more or less the same plot, but was slightly expanded, additionally featuring video segments based upon the various Doctor Who Dalek stories to further show on the various crimes that Davros had produced. These video portions are freely available online, as well as a plethora of behind-the-scenes content, but there's currently no way you can watch any version of the stage show or even experience the full story. Evil of the Daleks was the final black and white Dalek story, as it would be a 5-year gap before they would reappear in the show, but the following year they made a special guest appearance in a season 3 episode of Out of the Unknown, where it's set within the mental psyche of an individual, dealing with the comprehension of fighting off childhood nightmares. Based upon the short story, Dreams Are Sacred, it also featured an additional cameo from the police box TARDIS. Ironically, during the production of this episode, the Doctor Who serial, made roughly at the same time, The Mind Robber, had borrowed some robot costumes, which had originated from the Out of the Unknown series. If there was one thing that the prior show had over Doctor Who, was that it was actually filmed in colour. Unfortunately, Out of the Unknown had many missing episodes, sadly including this one. During the same year as the second Dalek movie, Peter Cushing reprised his role for a pilot episode of a Doctor Who radio series. Just like the films, the pilot followed the concept of the show rather than the continuity of it. But the pilot to the Doctor Who audio series has now gone missing, but there is a shred of optimism that it may still exist out there. The 1964 Doctor Who story Land of Giants was meant to be a 4-part serial, although episode 3 and 4 were heavily cut down to be a 3-part story instead. On the DVD release, they got the surviving actors and a few impersonators to replicate the original filming script. In Patrick Troughton's second Doctor Who story, Highlanders, currently a completely missing Doctor Who story. In the episode, they introduced the character of Jamie. The character was well received by the public, so much so they went back to the original filming location to refilm a new ending, where Jamie goes off with the Doctor and Ben and Polly, scrapping the original footage where Jamie waves goodbye to the TARDIS team. Jamie would become one of the longest serving TARDIS companions. With the exception of Power of the Daleks and the 3 Doctors, he would appear in every single story with Troughton. The original ending to Highlanders, as well as the extensive cut to the Land of Giants, were more than likely disposed not too long after those productions. The Abominable Snowmen was the very first Doctor Who episode where there was extensive filming location outside of England. In Wales' mountainside of Snowdon, the news coverage of BBC Wales covered the filming for the story, with Troughton being interviewed a rare during his tenure, as he was very reluctant to appear in talk shows or do interviews. The news coverage has yet to have re-emerged. During the 90s, the Bill and Ben Video, or BBV, were trying to acquire the license to the Cybermen to make a direct-to-video film called The Cyber War. The report at the time that it would have seen the Cybermen battle against the Ice Warriors, but negotiations virtually went nowhere for BBV, so to skirt around the copyright, some creative inspiration was done to create the Cyberons, which appeared in some audio stories, and a direct-to-video film, although the former content received a cease and desist from the BBC. Perhaps a little bit too inspired from the official stuff. During the 1980s, Doctor Who fan Julian Vince, clinging for a third Doctor Who movie, decided to make his own, not having a lot of money around. He created the Daleks as small miniatures, intercutted with live-action actors. The project spent a couple of years in production, but was never finished, as the team disbanded to work on other stuff. The model shots of the Daleks have appeared in 2 documentaries, 1995's Dalek Mania, and a documentary about Doctor Who fan films included on the Wartime DVD. Julian had uploaded a 4-minute portion on his MySpace account, and on his site, he stated that there's still more footage to be seen. Sadly for Julian, in the 2010s, he's been in a rather dire situation, as he's lost his family house and reportedly, he's gone homeless. And he's been inactive on Facebook for a very long time now, as well as being unresponsive with his Gmail account. Julian, if you're watching this video, and I know that's a very slim chance that you are watching this video, but if you are, then please feel free to reach out, as I and so many others have been greatly inspired by your work, as I would love to sit down and talk to you about your career. Abducted by the Daleks was the title for a softcore porn parody of the Daleks. Released on DVD in 2005, although it was very quickly retracted by the Terry Nation estate over not consenting towards the use of the Daleks. The filmmakers tried to give the parody a more comedic name to skirt around the copyright, which didn't really get too far. Physical copies are rather hard to come by, but if you look in the right places, you can still view the film online. The Chuckle Brothers were the Laurel and Hardy of the UK, with their TV show being amongst the longest running kids shows on the BBC. In 2006, they did a theatre performance taking their spin on the sci-fi genre, called Dr. Watt, The Revenge of the Daleks. Despite being on the title of the poster, the titular Dalek only appears rather briefly in the actual show. The real villain of the piece is the Mister, an obvious knockoff on the Master. The Chuckle Brothers have had well over 50 performances on stage, 4 of which were filmed and released on VHS and DVD. But the Doctor Who parody, amongst many others, never had the same luxury. With the exception of the stage poster, the only other bit of the stage show that has materialised is a short video clip, reciting the 12 Days of Christmas, but in their Chuckle Brother fashion. Okay, so for level 9, I'm gonna leave that up to you guys. Because at this point, there's going to be something so obscure that even I have never heard of it. So if you're upset that I've missed anything out, then this is your opportunity to put it down in the comment sections below. What other obscure Doctor Who media that's out there? I'll just give you half a second. You've done it? You good? Right, let's go on to the final level. Now, unlike the rest of the stuff on the list, where there's references and evidence that they did indeed once existed at some point or another, this piece of lost media, I don't have any backing that it indeed does exist. This was information that was relayed to me by somebody that was on set, which out of respect I won't identify this individual. Of course, for a video like this with factual information, something like word of mouth isn't very strong backing. From my point of view, I don't personally see a reason why they would lie to me, as it doesn't seem to be in their character. But again, I don't have any other way to prove this bit of information, so I can fully understand if you wouldn't believe me on this piece of lost media. I mean, for all I know, maybe all this information is false. I would say treat it nothing more like a rumour. Okay, we're good? Right, I shall now relay the information that my mate told me. Elizabeth Sladen, who played Sarah Jane in the Doctor Who franchise, would unfortunately pass away in early 2011. This would lead to only half of a completed season from her spin-off series, The Sarah Jane Adventures. The remaining episodes were broadcast in late 2011. Incidentally, there was still some unused footage of Elizabeth Sladen from the non-completed episodes. Several years later, a possible planned season 9 episode of Doctor Who was going to be about the passing of the in-universe character of Sarah Jane. A small test was conducted where Capaldi's Doctor on board the TARDIS ship was alongside the hologram Sarah Jane, utilising the unused footage, with one of the lines that Sarah says to the Doctor, Doctor, I love you.
When we would say goodbye, we were always a little bit tongue-tied, you know? Nudges, you know? But I don't remember the last time I saw her. For us.